Hello everyone and welcome to this 5th episode of Movin'On Inside. I'm thrilled to be here with you today to look into the challenges raised by mobility for all in sparsely populated areas. So, what's on our show today? We will be discussing some of the compelling questions in our expert debate about the alternatives to using cars in rural areas and whether rural populations really have any other viable choice. Also, coming up, an exclusive behind-the-scenes report on Flexy, the road rail solution looking to revive local railway lines. And what's more, you will learn all about the adoption of autonomous vehicles through a vision of sustainable and inclusive mobility from one of the most emblematic Movin'On communities of interest. And finally, our guest, Vasilis Agoridas, leader of the UIC2 initiative with the European Civitas program, will answer the question that is on everybody's lips. Can aerial mobility be considered as truly sustainable, and what role it can play in rural areas? Throughout the show, you can react live, ask your questions. You just have to go on the slido.com, enter the code that you see appearing on your screen, 3708884, or scan directly the QR code that appears, I think, at the bottom of your screen. And I'm sure, like me, that you can't wait to get started. So let's dive in. Time for the expert debate. And my guests are joining me on the set, but before that, some context. More than 40% of the world's population lives in rural areas, and urban sprawl continues to spread out housing, employment areas and services. The major mobility issue for inhabitants is to have a choice of credible alternatives to private cars. So how can we move around differently in sparsely populated areas? To explore one of today's hottest mobility issues, I'm pleased to have with me some very special guests who you can see around this set. We have Alphonse Coulot. Alphonse, so you're the mobility project manager, La Fabrique de la Cité. Hello, it's great to have you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you.
On my left, Thomas Cotte, the CEO and founder of Weaver. Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
Right, and Gaël Keinec. Is that correct?
Keinec,
yes, Director of Prospective at Michelin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. So how are you guys? Good?
Good.
Happy to be here?
Yep.
Yeah, so before we get started in our discussion, it's time to get to the heart of the matter before hearing what our guests have to say about challenges of rural mobility. Let's get a little bit more background.
3.4 billion people live in rural areas. That's over 40% of the world population. Although there are big differences between countries, with Asia and Africa among the most affected areas, the challenge of making mobility accessible to all is huge. Many point to the risk of a two-speed dynamic as we develop and deploy new mobility solutions. On one hand, dense, well-connected areas are benefiting from technical progress and gradually abandoning individual vehicles for shared modes of transport, which are more environmentally friendly and economical for users. On the other, rural areas and small towns may seem, at times, condemned to rely almost exclusively on the car to get around. Against a backdrop of limited public transport and high dependency on cars, sparsely populated areas are expected to guarantee convenient and comprehensive travel, from cities to rural areas and vice versa, within rural areas and between villages and settlements, within a municipality with scattered settlements or larger villages. While initiatives are being developed in some regions, alternatives to the car in rural areas remain insufficient or non-existent. The proposed transport infrastructure is often designed for large cities, but less well adapted to more dispersed areas. For example, nearly 80% of people living in France don't have access to any daily transport solutions other than the car. This reality can generate a feeling of unfairness or being forgotten, when in reality, mobility in less densely populated areas is a powerful lever for local authorities to dynamize the surrounding areas. It is crucial for economic development, social inclusion, access to employment, and purchasing power. Let's not forget that beyond its impact on the population, rural mobility has direct consequences for the environment. Given that 30% of greenhouse gas emissions come from transport, the impact of huge numbers of personal vehicles on rural roads is considerable. We therefore urgently need to offer people living in rural and suburban areas new forms of mobility, while also expanding and improving the solutions already in place and ensuring they are financially viable. So, what mobility solutions to connect and serve outlying communities?
Very insightful video indeed, with some interesting facts and figures. So whether talking about rural or sparsely populated areas, the countryside, outlying territories or city outskirts, can rural mobility be defined solely in opposition to urban mobility? This is the first question that I would like to ask you around the table here. So probably quick insight on that. What are the main features? What should we be looking at?
Yes, I think first of all that when we talk about urban mobility or rural mobility, it's too simple. The problem is more complex, unfortunately or fortunately. And first of all, we have to discuss about the departure and destination. You can have a journey where the departure is in the rural area and destination in a city, for example, or the contrary. You can have a journey across a rural area, but starting point in a city and destination in another city, and you can have all these kind of travels. So in fact, it's not too simple. And after that, there is the motive. It's a normal homework. Travel. This is for shopping. This is for health, for administration, or things like this. And for me, the third characteristic is the infrastructures. We can define the mobility like if the infrastructures are the same. There is a rural area where there is transportation mode, for example, and others where there is nothing. And we have to combine all these things. So we can define it in opposition between urban and rural area mobility.
Thank you, Thomas. Alphonse and Gail would like to have quick reaction on what you heard, but also in the video, the figure 80%, that's huge, and that's in France, for example. So maybe briefly.
Yes, it's an issue for all the world, and including the developed country, but there are real big differences between rural inhabitants in the world. Much more between rural inhabitants than between urban inhabitants. There are much more differences between a French rural inhabitant and a Pakistanese one than two urbanites from Karachi or Paris or wherever. So it's really very, very different, and depending on some indicators like the Rural Accessibility Index in, I think, half of the world, at least all Africa that you know very well, more than half of the people are living more than 2 kilometers of a whole season road. So even if in France we have real issue, it's also issues of inequalities between urban and access to jobs and this kind of issue. Let's not forget how different it is all over the world, and based on the level of development and infrastructure density of a country.
Alphonse, your perspective?
Maybe to finish with another figure, you have like 85% of people driving alone in the cars. So that's like to see how huge the step is before we actually provide some solutions to the rural areas. And I think you were right, it all depends on what you do and why you move. Like we can probably have something regular if you move every day at the same time in the morning or in the evening, like to go to school or to go to work. That could probably work like for public transport. But if you try to move, I don't know, third day or just every single day because you don't know why, you need to take up the kids, you need to buy some food or something, there's nothing like regularity cannot work and you need the car. So I think we need to find a solution that works with every kind of movement. And so we need different solutions because we have different types of movement.
Okay, but I've heard that we need the car. So will the cars reign forever? That's a valid question.
Yes, but people are pragmatic. In fact, as long as the cost, the safety, and the time of travel are not competitive with other solutions, we're gonna keep the car. It's not we don't want to have a car and drive a car. It's just that there is nothing else, and it's difficult. So we're gonna talk about it after. But we need important investment in public transportations model and alternatives like bicycle, for example, but precisely in front of the needs and not big investment. But at the end, when at the end nobody uses it because it's not, like you say, it's not my need. In fact, when I go to school, for example.
Yeah, totally. I use an electric scooter, right? To be honest, in the city, so I don't need a car. And
Yes, cars are very good machines made for a little bit of everything. They are excellent in nothing and good in everything. So, regarding mobility, of course. So, and they have been designed for medium distance trips. So much more designed for rural mobility than for urban mobility. Thus, many new cars, micro cars, designed for very dense environment. While in rural areas, it works. It works. The issue is much more the business model, the cost, the quantity of materials for moving only one person, thus the quantity of wealth for moving only one person, which is non-rational. But as like a machine, I mean, it's a very, very performing machine for the generalist usage. You can do your shopping, can do.
Yeah, absolutely. But like what you've said is we don't have alternatives. Today we'll have alternatives. Today we're a little bit condemned. So this is.
Yeah, but I mean, the word you use is very important. It's like rain. I don't think the car will reign forever, but at least it will remain because of its practicality, its economy, its the comfort it provides. It's just like it will need to go electric and lighter and more efficient. We will need to share it and like provide like car sharing and just whether your family, colleagues, neighbors, you will need to share the car. But we will still need some sort of a car, just electric and lighter. But we will need it. We will need the road to continue moving because, well, it's practical and it's easy. So.
And let's not forget that the rain is far to be accomplished. In many regions of the world, most regions of the world, people don't have as many cars as we do. So for many people, it's still a dream to access, maybe not to own, but at least to access to the cars and all the service they provide.
Right. I'm just flying back from Africa and can tell you the cars everywhere. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yes, but it's not because for the moment maybe the car is very important in the rural area that we can do differently. We don't talk a lot about eco-driving, for example, but this is something very interesting. 20% of the cost of the car in 1 year, for example, and it depends how you drive, but sometimes 50% of fuel can be saved. So
you mean that people don't know how to drive?
Sorry. No, but yes, I at short term, and maybe you will be surprised, but I think the best alternative to the car is the car, but differently. We talk about carpooling. Yes, we have a lot of work to do, but eco-drive. Nobody know what is eco-driving because maybe there is no money in this way to drive. But this is something really interesting. If you save half of the fuel, this is like if there is one car on the road and not two. So it's something really interesting. There is something else. It's the park and ride. The public transportation dedicated parkings, when there exist, it's really interesting. You go to the periphery of the town, and after that you take public transportation.
Right. So we mentioned a couple of things: cycling, walking, electric scooter. Right. So, but in sparsely populated areas, we can't use these kind of modes of transportation. So today, are there alternatives that really work, that exist? What can you share?
First, it depends on the journey. I think that below 10 kilometers, you can use bicycle once they are assisted electrically, which is a revolution actually for many people. And same also for the autonomous shuttles. For short distance, even if it's still a bit slow, for short distance, it works. So it depends on the journey. One of the issues is that we use always the same tool for any kind of journey by lack of alternatives and by lack of offering, and maybe by inertia also in our behaviors. But once where it's difficult, it's where you go from a very sparse regions to go to a city, and if there is no facility to ease the multimodal approach, like we have in many middle towns, even in France still, then it's very difficult to avoid using the car. And the car is also very practical to make trips when you drop the children, you make your shopping, you make multi-thing that you will hardly make with alternative mode.
Now, if we get back to what's happening in cities, for example, we're speaking a lot about decarbonisation. So all these wide-reaching initiatives, to decarbonise transport, which is a priority, right? So is it not going to threaten or overshadow rural mobility issues? What do you think?
One way to see differently the problem could be to drive the services to the rural area. If you can work on your little town, if you are health, if you are the ability to do shopping and a school, you don't need to move. In fact, you don't need to go to the city every day. So if we can't do differently, if we have to keep the car for the moment, maybe we could drive the services in this kind of area, which is not the case for the moment.
Right.
You don't have Uber Eats in a little town.
No.
So
not yet.
why do you have a school or things like this? This is maybe a way to, at the short term, to have an alternative, not a mobility alternative, a non-mobility alternative.
Any views?
Yeah. One of the issues of the decarbonation is probably that today, the fossil fuels are not expensive enough to sustain alternative business models and sustain alternative technologies. But we are experiencing that their price is growing, and this will continue for sure. So alternative energies such as hydrogen, in Michelin we believe a lot in hydrogen, or whatever the electric source, should gain traction a little bit progressively, and maybe at least an intermediary step could be achievable, which is to have only one car per household also, because it's not black or white. You probably hardly can avoid to have any car because you have to go to the hospital, you have the children and so on. But maybe we don't need 2 or 3 cars per household as we usually have in Western Europe and the States. Maybe if there were a denser network of alternative options. And probably, the decarbonation will be helped somehow, eased by the cost of the carbonized mobility. And people in rural mobility, they have a much higher share of their income going to mobility. So they are very pragmatic. So if they will find a solution that works and that is cheaper and that provides a service, for sure they will go. There are much less behavioral obstacles.
You mean adoption will be easy?
Yes, because the pain point is real, much higher than in the cities where you have plenty of alternatives and you have just to make a choice. But in most of the rural, you don't have choice. But if there were, probably they will go for the most economical and ecological one.
Right, Alphonse, what do you think?
I agree, because we've been very good at developing long distance trip, like with a high-speed train. You go from Lille to Marseille and you take the TGV. Then we've been very good at avoiding cars in city centres, developing public transport, micromobility, walking, stuff like this. And then we've not been very good at dealing with the mid-range trips, like you live in a rural town, you work in another town, and you do like 35, 40 kilometers a day, you need your car. And I think this is the real deal, and this is the big share of CO2 emissions. And as long as we don't deal with that problem, we won't do anything like impactful and useful, honestly, for this, like CO2 transport related.
Right, and alternatives to travel itself, maybe providing, the ability to individuals to access goods and services without having to make like that real journey. And is there a viable solution, or are we just we have inadequate mobility services in the territories? So what can you say about that?
Well, you said Uber Eats. I don't know if we're all going to develop a Uber Eats in every French small rural town, but I agree with the idea that we need to just develop other local services, because like if there's no hospital, no social stuff near you. You just need your car and go to town. And it's all related to like how we shape cities and how we tend to like concentrate everything. But at the same time, I don't think the solution just lies in giving people everything at their house and just bet on the fact that they're not going to move anymore. Because like if you look at what happened in the past 40, 30 years, just like we just tend to move more every year. So even though with the COVID regulations and stuff, we just want to move like for leisure, like job, or we can't tell people, sorry, don't move because we're a bit of a climate emergency.
Yeah,
so
totally.
there's no
I feel
way-
bad about my own carbon footprint
Yeah.
traveling all the time, so I know what you mean.
I agree. I think we have to imagine a new business model, a new way to live in these rural areas, and to give a second life to these towns. Because I don't think that people are really want to go to the urban area. And after the crisis, the sanitary crisis, and today a study said that young people want to find a quality of life first now when they find the first job. I don't think really that everyone want to live in a city, but there is the dreams and there is what you
The
can
reality.
do. Yes, exactly. So I think we have to imagine a second life, because there is a lot of very good things in this kind of area, and this is the challenge, in fact. So maybe not a mobility challenge, in fact.
Right. So mobility is a real lever of attractiveness actually for territories. So who can we rely on to finance those new solutions? I think that's the big question. So the public sector, the private sector, I mean, everyone. So what can you say?
If you see the history, this is not people who choose the car. This is the business. This is companies.
Came with a product.
Yes. So this is
To make their lives
think
easy.
The investment have to come from the state, the collectivities, communities, and after that, when the infrastructures and robust infrastructures exist, people can finance it. But after the big investment, this is the case in France today, and it's like this. We are in this direction, so we have to keep it and to do it now.
Yeah.
We will need both. But first, in economies like ours, where half of the economy pass through the public, because half of the GDP is passed through all the public sphere in France, at least. But I think it's more or less the same ratio in all Europe. Everything has to be somehow connected to policies. And what is extremely striking is that I think you should do the numbers. There is 1,000 more policies on urban mobility than on rural mobility. So first, it's still not a subject for policy. If you ask for the government objective for access to mobility, time on mobility for all over, there is no one except in 1 or 2 regions in Europe.
But that's changing, hopefully. There's more balance.
The words are changing. The policies are still not in place, and so there is little way for a local community, for example, to gain subsidies, to put in place programs that will make sense for them, but they hardly finance. But so this is one part, and the other part, of course, is the business model. The business model compared to alternative so as long as the carbonized fossil fuels are so cheap, as cheap as they still are today, and probably it will be hard to finance electric mobility at large scale, but unfortunately, to some extent, it's coming, and in very short time, probably 2 or 3 years, it will be even more economically rational, even in France or wherever in Europe, to go electric. So probably this should release some business models that today are not competitive. Because of the relative high cost of alternatives.
Alphonse?
I think quickly, like, we need to work on 3 things, like infrastructure and making sure the infrastructure follows the innovation. As you said, innovation for vehicles, electric and everything. And then probably the most difficult is like changing habits. and making sure that people actually want to use an electric car or bus. And I think the three things need some sort of partnership between public and private, because you need to foster innovation and we need to finance innovation, and the public can foster the innovation and the private can, with a bit of a private money, just tend to develop more innovation. And this is how I think we can work on going net zero for transport, is using the three. And if we forget the social aspect or the infrastructure aspect, we don't really make any impact at all. So
You're right.
we need the three engines, basically. Well, electric engine, but we need three
Can we
engines.
slightly disagree? It should
Yeah, totally,
Yeah, really.
totally. That's
No, because when I hear changing habit, I'm always a bit skeptical, because I'm not sure that there are so unchangeable habits. I just think that there are business models that are not customer centric enough. So if really it works, because people, they have pain points, they need to move, and they need to move at a cheaper price, because the price of mobility for rural income is very high.
it's very high.
Very high. And it's very unfair. And also, the car-only system is very unfair for many people, the senior, the young, the very poor. So if we collectively, probably with the help of policies, manage to make a real customer-centric business model, I'm sure they will take off. People will change their habit for better.
This is what we hope. Yeah, Alphonse, you agree?
No, I agree. It's just sometimes if you have two choices, like taking the car for 30 minutes or taking two buses for 20 minutes, you will take your car because it's comfortable, you have music, you can call to your dad and just have a quick chat on the go. Even though it's cheaper to take two buses and even time saving. So that's why about changing habits is just, yes, obviously if the private can provide some proper change, we will use new vehicles or new ways of transport, but there is still a share of the population that likes what it is and a bit reluctant to change, and we're all like this, obviously.
Thomas, we are running out of time. Maybe I'll leave you just a final word. But this is what you're doing. You see enthusiasm in the territories because with your platform. So very briefly.
Exactly. With the platform Weaver, we collected the pain points. We want to build the future of mobility, focus on the pain point, because we are experts.
Pain, lots of pain.
Pain points. We are experts in our mobility, so never disinformation is taken account. So with Weaver, we would like to use it firstly, and after that, build and test, because there is a lot of things to learn and test to build this future.
Fantastic. So let's build this together. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was great having you. And time to close the debate. An exciting discussion in so many ways. Like every time, thank you all for sharing your experiences and views in what I think is a steep challenge and very delicate issue. Well, mobility for all in outlying areas, this is the shared ambition of our experts. So should we reopen local lines serving rural areas which have been shut down because they were unprofitable? Yes, but not only that. If the Flexy transport system is anything to go by, so what's special about it? It's a hybrid solution, meaning it works just as easily on roads as on rails. So this revolutionary machine is the end result of collaboration inside a consortium that brings together the SNCF, which is the French Rail, the Miller Group, Michelin, and the Railinium Technological Research Institute. So take a look at the images and see how in the future, with Movin'On and the Flexy consortium, you'll be able to catch a train at your bus stop. Really incredible. This Flexy shuttle instinctively reminds me of another equally famous means of transport, and who better than Alain Barrier from the Business Development Urban Business Unit at Michelin to answer that. I think he's here with us. So after all, the Michelin locomotive and Flexy are actually two gems of know-how and innovation, both made in France. Hello Alain.
Bonjour Achard, ravi également.
So this could be the great comeback for Michelin.
C'est beaucoup plus que ça, Achard. La Michelin, c'était une invention géniale, ça fonctionnait avec des pneus spécialement conçus, mais elle ne roulait que sur des rails. Ici, on va beaucoup plus loin. La Michelin sort de ses rails, au plus proche de ses utilisateurs, et ça change tout.
Well, no doubt about it. I would really like to try this new vehicle. And for that to happen, the consortium's technical teams are hard at work day in, day out. Well, I think the first day was spent testing the technical base that drives the Flexy transport system, which took place on the Idiada test tracks mid-February. It was a unique opportunity to look behind the scenes of an extraordinary project. And finally, how is Flexy an innovative project?
Flexy est une solution innovante et aussi finalement disruptive, parce que c'est la première fois qu'on va proposer aux autorités organisatrices, à nos clients, vraiment une solution extrêmement simple, à la fois ferroviaire et routière, extrêmement simple, extrêmement frugale, avec des innovations qui sont industrialisables dans un temps très court. L'idée, c'est, en deux mots, c'est de mixer la culture ou l'ADN automobile, donc qui est l'ADN de la série, qui est l'ADN de l'industrialisation, qui est l'ADN du coût le plus juste possible, avec celui de l'ADN du monde ferroviaire. Donc ce monde ferroviaire qui est un monde de fiabilité, d'exigence, mais qui est aussi à des coûts qui sont assez élevés par rapport aux attentes actuelles de mobilité sur ces petites lignes de desserte fine. Donc voilà, donc là avec le consortium assez bien choisi, tout l'objectif c'est de développer cette solution à partir de ces deux ADN, de créer un nouveau objet, un nouveau système ferroviaire qui soit plus inclusif, parce qu'on pourra aller quitter les voies ferrées dans tous les sens du terme pour rejoindre vraiment le centre d'attractivité de l'agglomération qui va être le collège, qui vont être l'hôpital, qui vont être la mairie ou les commerces. Plus économique parce que en mariant ces deux ADN, on peut avoir un prix beaucoup plus bas, et puis aussi beaucoup plus écologique parce que naturellement la consommation sur voie ferrée est beaucoup plus faible que sur route. Donc au final, en fait, on offre un déplacement beaucoup moins consommateur de CO2 pour la collectivité. Donc voilà, donc en résumé, vraiment, cette offre, ce système disruptif, un nouveau, totalement innovant, c'est le mariage de ces deux ADN avec une offre plus inclusive, plus économique et plus écologique.
Pour Rainium, Flexy est innovant à plusieurs niveaux, mais compte tenu de nos activités, Flexy, il est pour nous innovant en termes d'abord d'architecture. On est sur un véhicule automobile qu'on va mettre sur rail. C'est pas ce qu'on a l'habitude de voir dans les ferroviaires. Et aussi, il est innovant en termes de liaison au sol et de roue double fonction. Donc cette roue, notamment en mode rail, elle a aussi un bandage en caoutchouc qui va modifier énormément le comportement par rapport à ce qu'on a l'habitude de voir dans le ferroviaire, où le contact est plutôt faire-faire.
And what are the skills brought by each member of the consortium? I mean, SNCF, Michelin, Mila and Railinium.
C'est un très beau consortium qui s'est réuni autour du projet Flexy, du système Flexy. On a 4 partenaires qui sont un peu les 4 mousquetaires. D'abord, on a Michelin qui apporte tout son professionnalisme sur le contact entre la partie sol et le bord du véhicule, donc à la fois avec son expérience routière avérée, et puis aussi en développant cette roue double fonction avec les ingénieurs de SNCF et les ingénieurs de Mila, et qui permet vraiment de réussir en fait cette innovation rail et route. Donc vraiment un acteur incontournable. Mila qui est notre start-up qui porte la construction du véhicule. Des anciens de Stellantis qui ont monté cette structure, qui s'avère être quasiment un des leaders sur la conduite autonome sur le territoire français. Donc ils apportent vraiment toute cette capacité d'innovation, une boîte très légère, très réactive. Et puis on a Railinium qui est l'institut de recherche technologique bien connu dans le monde du ferroviaire et qui apporte toute cette connaissance académique qui est indispensable à la réussite de ce genre de projet très disruptif. Et naturellement SNCF, dont je fais partie, qui est présente avec toutes ses composantes, hein, à la fois les composantes de recherche, avec la direction de la recherche, et puis aussi surtout les composantes de gestionnaire d'infrastructure, avec la filiale Sphéris, qui apporte toute cette innovation sur l'exploitation, sur les matériaux allégés, et puis aussi naturellement le centre d'ingénierie du matériel, ainsi que l'agence d'essais ferroviaires, qui font à la fois le TGV, qui font le TER, et qui font aussi, qui nous aident à développer le projet Flexy. Et puis il y a d'autres partenaires qui ne sont pas des partenaires directs, hein, qui sont pas partie du consortium, mais qui sont des partenaires indirects, hein, du projet, que sont les autorités nationales de sécurité nationale en France, donc que sont le STRMTG et puis le PSF, qui porte la sécurité dans le monde du transport guidé, dans le monde ferroviaire, à la fois ferroviaire classique, lourd, et puis le ferroviaire léger, et qui nous aide en fait dans les sollicitations quotidiennes qu'on peut avoir avec eux, qui vont nous aider en fait à réussir ce beau projet très innovant pour le territoire français.
Thank you all. What a source of inspiration, Flexy, a transport system that combines the best of several worlds. And one last question for you, Alain, maybe. Isn't it surprising to see Michelin associated with a project like this? I mean, through its urban business line.
Donc, comme vous le savez, Michelin fait notamment des pneus de voitures, Michelin fait notamment des pneus de camions, de bus, mais ce que vous ne savez peut-être pas, c'est que Michelin fait aussi des pneus de tramway et de métro, ce qui nous rapproche du monde du ferroviaire. Notre mission au sein de la ligne business urbaine, c'est de nous associer à toutes ces nouvelles mobilités décarbonées et proches des citoyens, dès lors que l'on est capable d'apporter des solutions, de la valeur, et cela pas uniquement avec des pneus. C'est l'essence même de la marque Michelin, et avec l'innovation au cœur de notre ADN, c'est normal que nous accompagnions ce projet ambitieux Flexy, initié par la SNCF et amené dans sa dimension écosystémique par Movin'On.
Rail and road together, we look forward to keeping track of the adventures of Flexy. I now invite you to dive into the heart of a new mobility issue also addressed by Movin'On. What if the autonomous vehicles were to serve outlying regions? Just like Flexy, a co-innovation carried by a consortium born from Movin'On, I now have the pleasure of welcoming the representatives of a community of interest that is also working on the deployment of a new mobility solution for rural areas. Hello, gentlemen, welcome.
Hello.
So with me today, Nicolas Maresco. So Nicolas, you're the Deputy Director of Member Needs and Innovation at the Massif. And on my right here, Benjamin Baudet, the Managing Director of Betty.
Yeah.
So it's great to have you both here. So how are you?
Fine. Thanks.
Fantastic. So I have lots of questions for you, but we have not lots of time, so we'll try to make it work. So my first question, so probably for Nicolas, like the mobility for all in rural areas, we've seen from the report promoted by the SNCF and the partners of the Flexy Consortium, the credo of your community of interest is autonomy for all in rural areas. So probably to set the scene, what's behind this?
It's autonomy for all, mobility for all. When people think about autonomous vehicles, they think about an individual in his car going to the job. But what will change? A few things. Or maybe robo-taxi, zombie taxis. However, when you look at rural areas, 85% of people don't have the choice. It's a car or nothing. As an insurer, the risks are changing. Mm-hmm. As a mutual insurer, we are keen to work with Movin'On on a more inclusive and sustainable mobility, not with an individual car, but with a shared autonomous shuttle, electric, allowing people in rural peri-urban areas to move.
Right, so this is new. This is a new transformation in the business of insurance for you. The business is being a little bit reinvented, if I understand.
Yes, and it's not a single actor that can change anything. That's why we are happy to work collectively within the Movin'On Lab.
So, your community of interest aims to encourage the adoption of autonomous vehicles through a vision of sustainable and inclusive mobility. You mentioned it. So, how has the Movin'On ecosystem created the difference for your approach? So, probably both of you could just give an insight, but Nicolas, just very briefly.
Right. It started in 2018, the Movin'On Summit in Montreal. Then we took out pilgrim staff to see other members and to see if they would be interested. And today, we've got partners, both from transport actors such as Benjamin Betty or SNCF. It can be infrastructure with Vinci. It can be autonomous vehicles with Navia. It could be telcos with Orange, data with Microsoft, customer studies with Kantar, etc. So this together, and not only, and we also have other insurers. It's really open innovation for sustainable mobility.
Fantastic. So we will discuss about it a little bit more, but let's go a little bit deeper. I mean, the life cycle of your community of interest is very interesting to follow, and I know that you've gone through several phases from identifying a scope of opportunity to full-scale experiments. So we would like to learn a little bit more about this process. I would like just quick reaction on what you've heard and then probably answer the question, Benjamin.
Yes, I agree with Nicolas for the big change for rural area because Betty is a spin-off of a small company called Bertolami in a rural area of France called Drôme. So we learn a lot around autonomous shuttle for the last few years, but we understand that our rural area needs to find another solutions for their mobilities without cars. So shared autonomous shuttle are a good solution. For 5 years, we work on our local area, Val de Drôme, to understand what we can do with that. And we have made the first step of our project in 2020. And in this project, we have made some edu tour with Movin'On and Massif. And we share what we want to do after that for the next future. And we create the project RIMA.
All right. And probably, Nicolas, just what about yourself?
Yeah, because the first year we deconstructed the object, not on the technology, because how many scientific studies have been done on the autonomous vehicles, in your opinion?
Yeah, maybe a lot.
100,000. But how many out of them are concerned the usage?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer. Tell me.
Less than 200. That's why our community of interest focuses on usages.
To be more concrete, I think that's what's missing.
And so the first year we deconstructed it. The second year we've made a world first, asking the elected officials about their acceptability. 10% say it's garbage. 25% say, okay, it's good, but only for people with disability. And 2 out of 3 elected officials say, all right, it's available, it's useful for anybody, everybody. In the last year, we made a benchmark, and in this benchmark, in rural areas, we discovered that it was Betty, Val de Drôme, with Vinci, Navia, which was the best field of experiment to go further.
So you managed to push government officials, even if there were not so many of them, but that's a good start.
Yes, and we won with Benjamin, with Vinci, with Navia, France 2030
right.
business.
So, yes, Benjamin, you wanted to add something?
Yes. What we want to create is a real area use case. We don't want to replace any system. We create new system because in our area, we don't have any mobility solutions like in a city. So we need to create something for a lot of people, young people, old people, people who works, people who doesn't work. It's very important for us to create something new. And we think that with autonomous mobility, we can bring a new future for this territory.
And obviously, I understand that your skills, what you bring together, is very complementary. So tell us, how does this work in real life? Who does what?
Actually, we have 4 private companies on our project. The first one is Navia. They build autonomous system in France and all around the world. They have autonomous shuttle, and we use this autonomous shuttle. For the first time, we will have 7 autonomous shuttle on the territory. Actually, when you make an experimentation around autonomous shuttle, you have 1 or 2 vehicles. That will be the first time that we will have a lot of vehicles. So it will be good to test the acceptability of the people. That is the job of Massif. There are also insurance for for the experimentation, but they try to understand what people want to and don't want. And in rural area, we need frugal infrastructure. So we work with Vinci to complete all vehicles capabilities with information from infrastructure. And Vinci works with them to develop new things around this autonomous network.
And what's interesting is we are working for the common good, so producing some reports and information shared available in French and English to everybody. But as Movin'On motto is from ambition to action, this community led to a consortium, so it's really going from this ambition to concrete action on the field, and not today only on a single experiment, but working tomorrow with a replicable model. For instance, there is in Rome an hospital with beautiful parking lot. So if you have a car, or if you take a taxi or an ambulance, good. However, if you don't have it, too bad. One of the lines of this project is going to allow people going to the hospital. And Benjamin discovered that there are more than 140 hospitals in France in the same case.
Without any public transportation. So if you want to go to the hospital, you need to have a car. And we know that in a few years, a lot of people don't have any more
This
car.
is terrible when we're in cities. We don't realize that. Yeah. So now, tell me, what are the next steps, right? So how do you envision a large-scale transition? I mean, how do we scale up to push this forward?
We try to learn a lot with this kind of experimentation, and we build an ecosystem with also the territories. They are part of our project. We are a private company, but we also have some territories who works with them because their communities need to find solution and need to build this solution with us. So it's very important to understand and to make this kind of experimentation. After that, we will have 3 main topics. The first is homologation. Actually, we made experimentation. We need to build a strong homologation, process homologation in Europe, and we work on it also with the French government, but with European Parliament to build the rules to have tomorrow autonomous vehicles on the road, on public road. So it's very important. The second topic is to have a business model.
Of course.
Because actually we don't have any public transportation or rural area because we don't have any money. So we need to find something where we can have a good business model, and we think that, and it's a test also in our experimentation, that autonomous mobility and autonomous network could have some passenger, but also be used for goods. So we work on goods transportation to make a good business model between passengers and goods. It's the second step. The third step is to have the opportunity to build with other territories this kind of project. And we work with Massif and Movin'On to create a one-stop shop for these collectivities to find the good answer around our technology, but also use case. So it's very important to create something together when we will have the answers, but they have the questions. So we will try to put together and find the good issue.
Thank you. Very briefly, Nicolas.
Yes. When we asked the elected officials, 15% of them were keen to develop this kind of solution in their territory within the 3 to 5 years. But where do they go? To our one-stop shop.
Right. And Benjamin, I want the same next time you bring it to me.
Of course. It's a pleasure. It's our communauté coq vert.
Coq vert,
Yes,
right?
if
It's
for,
green rooster, right? Yeah. So which means it's a symbol of sustainable development.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you to both of you. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Nicola. It was great to have you. And thank you for these enlightening insights. And once again, driven by committed organizations and personalities, as you've seen, moving on communities of interest and moving from ambition to action. And because Moving On is committed to exploring the potential of each form of transport for more sustainability and therefore more accessible mobility, we couldn't resist the opportunity to ask the question, what if aerial mobility had a part to play in rural areas? And to answer to this complex question, I'm being joined by Vasilis Agoridas. Hello, Vasilis.
Hello, Asa. I'm very glad to be here and I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion.
So you're the leader of the UAM initiative, Cities Community, UIC2. So could you probably briefly give us a rundown about your activities? What does this initiative consist of?
The UAM initiative Cities Community, or UIC2, as it is widely known, it is an initiative that it was established in 2017 as part of the Smart Cities Marketplace, supported by the European Commission, and since September 2022 is part of the EU's Civitas initiative. For those who are not familiar with these terms, it is the 20-year-old initiative supported by the European Commission in terms of policy making and support of sustainable urban mobility for cities. UIC2, it is an initiative, a community of which the members are only cities and regions. And in fact, it represents the voice of cities and regions in this emerging sector of urban air mobility or regional air mobility, depending how you refer to it. The point here is for the UIC2, for the cities and the regions, to put the actual entity, the city and the region, in the center of the discussion. When we say it is the voice of cities and regions for the responsible and sustainable development of urban air mobility solutions. So we don't take a technology perspective here, we really take a city and region perspective, city-centric, region-centric, with a focus on the needs of the citizens. These should be the drivers. It is not a funded project, it is not an association, it is a community which is based on the voluntarism of the cities and regions.
Well, the mission of UIC2 is to promote the sustainable and safe transition of mobility to its vertical dimension. Third dimension. What are the challenges for cities and regions?
So, as we mentioned, UIC2 is striving for the sustainable and responsible transition of urban mobility to the third dimension. So here we're talking about urban mobility first. And this is, I think, a key differentiator of the perspective as taken by many other different stakeholders in this emerging topic. So we really look at it from the urban mobility or regional mobility perspective and try to see whether in fact it makes sense from a mobility perspective. So if you are a region or a city, you have your strategic planning, wider urban planning and strategic planning about mobility. For example, European cities are working on developing the sustainable urban mobility plans, known as UMPs or SUMPs. Within UIC2, we developed and published in December 2021 through the European Mobility Observatory ELTIS, a practitioner briefing on giving support to cities and regions to think how urban air mobility, whether this is for passengers or for cargo freight, could be integrated in the sustainable urban mobility planning practices, activities. This is the challenge. And this is the challenge not only for cities and regions, but I would say for the wider mobility sector to identify where does it make sense. The big questions from city and region is, what is the benefit from my citizens? Do we really need it? Who is going to benefit? At what cost? So can I do this with another mode? We have to be able to give an answer to these questions. And if we really see the benefit, to see what is the trade-off we have to make in terms of cost, time savings, and the benefit we have.
According to you, was aerial mobility a potential asset in the challenge of opening up territories?
So there are a lot of discussions about how this new technology could be used. Is it to be used for intra-city commuting, for example, or logistics? Is it for suburban, rural? What about the areas that have no access? And this is where it starts to become interesting, at least from the benefit we can provide, but also cost-wise, because certain outlying areas, territories, they have no access to the mobility network. So what are the options? Whether we can invest not only in terms of funds, but also in terms of time to develop the new infrastructure in order to connect these areas. But in many cases, it makes no financial sustainability for different reasons. So this is where there is a potential benefit of using the aerial mobility, because you do not really need any major infrastructure. You just fly, you just need landing spots. The point here is to what extent we can scale this, or we want to scale this.
Finally, a question that everyone might be asking themselves, really, can aerial mobility be considered as truly sustainable?
So we have to consider, what do we mean by truly sustainable? If we take the triple bottom line, sustainability is defined around environmental topics, social topics, and economical topics. So the answer, it is by overlapping these three topics. It is not just about emissions. All of these, by definition, have to be electric. So, and considering that the production of this electric energy will be based on renewable sources, we could argue that the energy used is sustainable. The question is about not the quality of the energy, but the quantity. How can we justify that because of physics, as we have to hover, we have to consume more energy? And this is where now we plug in the financial part and the social part, which goes, do we really need to consume this extra energy? For what reason? There are certain cases that as a society, we see that we're ready to make this trade-off. And this is where we can consider it can be sustainable and responsible use. If now we just want just to look only at our convenience, and we just want to start commuting, perhaps, I don't know, left and right, don't use the other modes, and try to just replace them, perhaps is not a sustainable use of this new technology. As I mentioned before, the aim here is to explore synergies and complementarities, not substitution. So the answer is yes, it can be sustainable in the wider sense by taking really this big picture, and as a society having, I would say, a social contract about how we're going to use this.
Well, thank you, Vasilis, for your time. And thank you all for tuning in into this new episode of Moving On Inside and for all your reactions and input on our social networks. I would particularly like to thank our Moving On partners who took part and offered us such thought-provoking insights. You can watch the replay on the Moving On Connect website. I look forward to seeing you all very soon for the next episode of Moving On Inside. In the meantime, stay tuned on Moving On Connect to track the progress of all the projects we have looked at today, from the solutions developed by Weaver to Flexy and to the autonomous vehicle community of interest. Thank you and goodbye.